This is a Geek History of Time,
where we apply nerdery to the real world. I'm Ed Blaylock. I'm a father in my 40s, new father in my 40s, needs to be said. I'm a 7th grade world history teacher. My background in history is a BA, bad attitude, from the University of California at Davis. Go Ags. And my focus was on West Europe and Eastern Asia.
I'm Damian Harmony. I am also a father in my 40s. I've been raising two gingers as nerdy and geeky as I can get them to be, while still retaining their decency. I am a Latin teacher. I have a master's degree in history, focusing on women's suffrage in England and how socialists responded to that. I have a bachelor's in history, which focused on a myriad of things. But at current, I have some focuses foci in ancient Rome, as well as modern Congo and a few other places throughout the world. I have been geeking longer than I've been teaching. I've been geeking since, before I was the double digits, but I can tell you the very first game I really remember playing was probably the TSR Marvel role-playing game, where I got to be Captain America. And I learned that he knows his martial arts as well as Jarvis does.
Wow.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a real endorsement of Jarvis or if that's a real indictment of Cap's hand-to-hand skills.
It's an indictment of TSR.
Yes. And boy, could we indict them for a lot of stuff. But, I'm going to choose to write hagiography instead because I'm that kind of historian. And my own background, of course, also starts with TSR, as so many of ours do within our subculture, with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. So, Gary Gygax is to blame for how I turned out as an adult.
Do you remember your first class that you played?
Yeah. I'll give you 3 guesses.
Paladin.
Yes. Yep, right out the gate.
Yeah.
Right out the gate. And it has hardly varied ever since then. So, what are you playing right now?
Currently, I'm playing Dungeons and Dragons game, and you're in that game as well, as intermittently as being an early father
will allow.
But we're having a lot of fun with that, just kind of stretching our legs and really kind of, I think we're all about 4th level, maybe.
Yeah.
And so that's been a lot of fun. So I'm playing that game, and I'm hoping to hop into a couple other games soon. I'm also running my children through a dungeon.
Yep.
It's their first time playing D&D, and they're absolutely loving it.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah. What are you playing?
Well, I just want to say before I talk about that you got to be careful about, where and how you say that you're running your kids through a dungeon, because that might get you some weird looks. But right now I'm in that 5th edition D&D game. I'm also intermittently... and have been for a long time, playing a running campaign of, right now we're doing 1st edition AD&D, going old school, because our DM is that kind of guy. It's actually a lot of fun, theater of the mind kind of stuff, not a lot of miniatures, not a lot of that. And in that, I'm actually not playing a paladin. I am in fact playing a cavalier. Now, the interesting thing about that is, hold on. Everybody who knows me knows that, I move toward that axis of the player character thing, but I'm working very hard to play this guy as very much chaotic good. What's in it for me as I can get away with and still be good aligned. Okay. And I'm having an awful lot of fun messing with the heads of some of the other members of the group who've only ever seen me playing the upstanding, lawful good. We have to go save them. And, it's still, we're going to go save them, obviously, but while we're doing it, let's make sure we get paid.
Fair.
And, and I'm as much, and the character I'm playing is as much motivated by, oh, no, this will look great on a resume.
So
the bards, the bards will sing about this. Yes, this will increase my rep. This is awesome. Perfect.
Wow. So you're like a kid in a magnet program.
I kind of am. Yeah. So what are you reading right now? What do you got going on?
Right now I'm reading Punching Nazis and Other Good Ideas by local comedian and author Keith Lowell Jensen. It's a study of, essentially like what's going on in our current culture, as well as an examination of the Sacramento area's long history with the punk scene and fighting for and reclaiming the punk scene from Nazis who came up here and did all kinds of horrible things. I'm hoping to start reading Star Wars and the History of Transmedia storytelling soon, But I also might just take a dip back into rereading some old Star Wars novels because I loves me the Star Wars novels.
Okay.
They're really good. What are you reading?
I am currently working my way through a translation of the Manual of Fighting written by Joachim Meyer in the 1500s in Germany. As you know, as our audience may know, may not, I am involved in HEMA, Historical European Martial Arts. And so German longsword is my jam.
Okay.
And this is
How long is a German longsword?
Well, the I'd say standard would be from tip of the blade to pommel, whole length of the weapon. Generally is going to be, I'm 5'6", probably 4 feet 10 inches.
Okay, so pretty goddamn long.
It is indeed a long sword.
Yes.
They generally, when you read a manual about long sword fighting, it's a two-handed weapon. It is not what Dungeons and Dragons calls a longsword. That is an arming sword. A longsword, the shortest longsword would classify as what you'd call a bastard sword.
Okay.
The absolute shortest ones have a grip long enough for you to get your hand and 2 or 3 fingers of your offhand onto the grip.
Get some real lever action.
Yeah,
going.
And everything is leverage. Everything is all those angles. So anyway, that's what I'm reading right now because I need to do my homework before I go back to joining classes because I've been away while having a kid.
Yes.
Parenting. And then after that, since you go into what you're going to be reading next, after that, I'm going to pick up the next volume in the, and now I've forgotten the title of the series, but it's gone to me. But there's a wonderful historical mystery series by Laura Jo Rowland that is set in the Edo period in Japan, and her protagonist is a special agent of the shogun known as the Investigator of People, Places, and Events. And it's a lot of fun seeing the conventions of the mystery genre placed onto that particular time and place in that particular culture.
That sounds fun.
It is. It's a hoot. And Ichiro Sano novels, the Ichiro Sano series.
Nice.
So...
Well, that sounds fun. Well, last week, or last podcast, we delved into the history of what led up to the Comic Code Authority, and we pretty much ended right as we were getting to the hearings and to the grandstanding that was
the political theater
for the CCA to have gotten started. So this time we're going to finish off that story and probably get into a little bit of the legacy of it. The CCA is something that's very important to the both of us, though we might not have liked it. It led to the art form as we know it and grew up loving. So without any further ado, this is a Geek History of Time, diving right back into where we left off with the CCA. We'll see you on the other side. So it's 1954, right?
Yeah.
And you might bounce back a little bit earlier, but for me, I'm looking at like horror films and how much it's helped. We're tapping into our anxieties here.
Yeah.
And I'm looking into that. And in 1954, there's this book that came out. It's a really important book to this story. It's called The Seduction of the Innocent by Dr. Frederick Wertham or Wertham. Wertham. Okay. He'd been writing against comic books since 1948. So,
he had a real mad on.
Oh boy, howdy! And interestingly, what I tend to do when I'm looking at history is I'll like look at a milestone and then back it up and see how we got there. So, in 1948, he's been going off on comics probably since before that. Collier's magazine ran an interview with him in '48 called "Horror in the Nursery," in which he said, and I quote, "The number of, quote, good comics is not worth discussing, but the great number that masquerade as, quote, good certainly deserve close scrutiny." So they're amongst us. They're hiding amongst us.
Gee, you could almost take that straight out of that interview and put it in the dialogue from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Yeah, no,
Or-
that's or talking about Hiss or the Rosenbergs or
go back further during the Third Reich.
Yeah.
There are Germans amongst us who are not true Germans. Or go to the I forget which politician it was. He was a dude from Michigan though, and he said the very fact that the Japanese Americans haven't done anything is proof that they're planning it. Just that hysteria, and the word you used in the last podcast, hysteria, is very much a part of this. This is all a product of its time. So he says this in 48. In 1948, we've got the Marshall Plan. You've got communists in Greece. You've got the Truman Doctrine, which is inherently unstable for us to follow. And it basically reasons that the world is a disorderly place, which is true, but the disorder is a threat to us, which is problematic, because that's like saying grass is green, which is true, which threatens our very existence, how are you going to not green the grass other than torching it all?
Yeah, well, there was this pervasive idea amongst everybody in politics at the time that communism was the hogweed
good point. Yeah.
of the political realm.
Yes.
That it was this horrifically toxic thing, burns you on contact. If you try to cut it down, you got to wear gloves. I mean, it was this horrific thing that was this invasive species.
Yeah.
It wasn't just this is an ideological counterpoint to our own. It was
or that
honestly,
there's a plurality that can exist.
Yeah, or that it doesn't have to be all one or all the other. There's a spectrum, and we can kind of find something in between. Talking about third wave liberalism, which was born out of this later. But at that time, it was this idea that it was like hogweed. I was originally searching for kudzu, but I think hogweed is better because hogweed is, no kidding, destructive. It is dangerous to handle. It's horrible, ugly, terrible thing, and you've got to spend a lot of time and a lot of resources fighting it. And that was the view, was, oh my God, if this thing takes root, there's not going to be any stopping it. And the Soviet Union was in fact actively funding communist parties in nations all over the world.
True.
They were funneling money into the Comintern. It was legitimately a thing, which feeds back into talking about paranoids. The moment anybody who is paranoid gets any evidence that there is legitimacy to what they're afraid of, it just ramps everything up worse. And so it was not merely a popular hysteria. It was an academic political hysteria that communism was viewed that way. Now, in part, I think from my own point of view, my own study of this, looking at political history, the Soviet Union, meanwhile, the leadership of the Soviet Union was absolutely convinced that they had to foster communism in as many other places as they could, and they had to destabilize the West, because otherwise we were coming for them.
Yeah.
Because they'd been invaded God knows how many times previously by like everybody in the world.
Yeah.
Talking about Russia, not the Soviet Union, of course.
Right.
But, and that had given them a particular form of societal political trauma that they were absolutely convinced that the West was out to get them.
And there's two or three things I want to address there. One, the American idea of a world order was for security. And the Soviet idea of world order was for security. They're both looking for their own security. American security came through institutions. Soviet security came through land.
Yes.
So we're going to set up this buffer zone.
Yes, the Warsaw Pact is ultimately it's a border zone to prevent land invasion
from Germany. From
Germany. Yeah, I mean geographically, it has to be from Germany,
right?
But and a strengthened West Germany was something they were
absolutely
deeply afraid of,
and rightly so. I mean, let's take a look at how Germany was allowed. Speaking of hogweed, Germany was allowed to grow fascism.
Yeah.
And I mean, he had to make a deal with the devil, and then the devil bit him. It's that kind of thing.
Yeah,
I would point out though that two things. One, the Marshall Plan offered money to the Soviet Union.
Oh yeah.
One of the first people it offered to. Two, by 1950, I want to say, because Stalin dies in 53.
Yeah.
But by 1950, Stalin had basically told the International, we're not giving you money. We don't care. That didn't mean that he didn't say, go ahead and do your own thing. and that destabilizing or just harrying the West, getting us jumping at whatever we could, would keep the pressure off of the Soviet Union. Yeah. And he did see the Marshall Plan as being an invasive species unto itself.
Oh, yeah.
I would also point out that it's interesting you brought up this idea of hogweed, because I believe the only way to save your garden is to destroy the hogweed. Eradication, not just sequestration, but eradication.
No. Yeah.
So there can be no middle ground with hogweed. Mm. On top of that, the very metaphor of hogweed implies that you have a garden. It implies, and a garden is not natural. A garden is ordered
manicured
in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
You, as a gardener, get to decide what is a weed and what is not. We can actually both look out my window right now and see some very pretty yellow flowers that I'm going to be eradicating probably tomorrow because they don't belong in my grass.
Because they weeds.
Because they're weeds. Now, they're very pretty and my daughter loves them, but I don't want them in that spot, hence the garden thing. So I really like the idea that yes, Americans saw any disorder in the world as communist, as a weed, and as a threat to their beautiful garden that they were trying to set up. Now, in their defense,
as I want to say, I want to put an asterisk on as communist, as at least potentially communist, because the idea of the Truman, the idea of the Truman Plan wasn't necessarily that they're all communists. Oh God, it was the moment there is instability that gives room for communism, and authoritarian anything to take root. I mean, Truman was mostly worried about communism because, Stalin.
He was worried about Stalinism. Yeah. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah. So
you're right, but it's that disorder in the world.
Disorder is the steps within the Truman Doctrine are important, I think, while we're talking about it, just because there is a train of logic, and the train of logic does make sense from a certain set of assumptions.
Yeah, well, and it's there's your teleology, the begging the question. Yeah, I'm not going to pretend to know how to pronounce words. But
actually, you got that one right.
Hey, go me! But it is begging the question, and here's the question it's begging is, and by the way, if you don't know what begging the question is, I suggest you look it up, because it doesn't mean it raises a question. It means you set up an assumption and then base your actions off that assumption. And therefore, you're reacting to your assumption as though it's the prevailing reality. Yeah, and it's not, hardly ever.
And you're begging for somebody to say, "Wait, what about this assumption you made? Is that really true?"
Right. And so I would point out that with the Truman Doctrine, it not only said disorder in the world is a threat to order anywhere, which is problematic. It's poetic, but it's problematic. The other problem with it is that it said we have the means to stop disorder in the world, and we should use those means. All three of these things are very problematic, and will essentially get the American empire, because it was an empire, still is in many ways. It will get the American empire chasing its own tail, and instead of really being a force for good, it became a force for order. Yeah. Now, if you happen to be under the umbrella of what was orderly, you had a 50-50 shot of it being good for you, but it also meant that we were supporting a lot of fascist regimes and saying no to a lot of people who said, hey, about this Declaration of Independence. Yeah. So it's 1954, like I said, and he's very much Truman doctrining the heck out of comic books, this guy Wortham. He then goes to a symposium in 1948 in New York called The Psychopathology of Comic Books. You can just tell by the name where this is going to go, right? So it's December 20th, 1948. Okay, the day before my birthday, minus 30 years.
30 odd years.
29 years. But Time Magazine reported and printed pictures of a place called Binghamton in New York. These residents went house to house collecting comic books, and then they put them in a giant bonfire, and kids are watching, and there's pictures of kids watching these comic books being burned. I'm just glad there were no antecedents before this that would
that would be at all dangerous or troubling to anybody.
Comic books.
Holy crap.
Now keep in mind, these comic books were well, I'll get to the assumption that they make later. But keep in mind, these comic books, we're talking about comic books. Kids' comic books. And I understand, like, there's there is a tremendous effort on the part of the State Department at this point to fight communism with the kids. Like later on, you end up seeing like communism trading cards. Where you see Ho Chi Minh's rookie card and Mao Zedong's all-star card. It's hilarious.
Okay.
And it's a wonderful lesson that I used to teach when I taught U.S. history. But so there is an effort, and again, we talked about this last time. There was a recognition that kids are scary and that we need to keep kids safe, and we can't trust them. And under control.
Again, talking about order.
Exactly. And so
Stephen King's Principles of Horror. He talks about the Apollonic and the Dionysian.
Oh, Apollon and Dionysus.
And that true horror is created by an artist when you throw the Dionysian out, and it's all about chaos versus order. It's not good versus evil. It's not. I mean, it's only light versus dark because of the way our primal brain kind of ties that together.
Sure.
But it is always order versus chaos. Like if you throw out any horror franchise,
that's a good point.
You can take about 10 seconds and figure out what the Apollonic or Apollonian, I don't know which one is correct, element is and what the Dionysian element is.
You're absolutely right.
You
And very often, I mean, Dionysus is connected to madness, but he's also connected to wanton lust and excess.
And there's Freud again for you coming back into the picture.
Fear and desire.
Yeah. Well, and so I think it's important. What got me off on that jag was you mentioning. You were
jagging off to what kind of Dionysian?
Nice.
Thank you.
Good work. That's one for you there. But it's the thing to remember is this is all about order and control.
Yeah.
And we love our kids.
Yes.
We love them desperately and beyond measure, but we also want to keep them under control for their own good and because they terrify us.
When your son starts standing up, you will have
I don't even want to think about it yet.
You will have every urge and desire, and there's nothing wrong with the urges and desires to stop him from falling and hitting his head.
Yeah, he's already fallen off the couch once on my watch. I'm paranoid enough as it is.
You already see it as your watch, too.
Oh, God. Yeah. Oh, yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do.
Paging Dr. Freud. But no, it's a really, really important. I mean, you see my house. I have tile in the kitchen.
Yeah.
I've got hardwood floor on the floor.
Yeah.
My kids learned pretty quick not to fall down.
I could believe it.
All of their mental energies went toward
not falling
on our heads.
Yeah.
And there were all kinds
son's
of
got a big noggin too.
Oh, he's huge. He's top heavy. It's like an orange on a toothpick. But it's a thing that again, that desire to protect is the desire to control.
Yeah,
there are those levels, and I can certainly look back to loves that I have had that were not I'm going to say appropriate or healthy. Yeah. Where my desire to attend to someone very easily overlapped with a desire to control what they were doing because I know better.
Yeah.
Now imagine that on a governmental
level. I'm looking
level.
out for them. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's
a level of codependence.
Yeah. Well, it's a level of codependence, and when you mention look at that on a governmental level, that is from my upbringing in a Reaganite Republican household, and me still at heart being
you're an Eisenhower Republican.
I'm an Eisenhower Republican.
Yeah.
The fear of government is the fear of that overreach.
Right.
In certain areas to a certain level, and then you get into the tension within that ideology, those ideologies between, we need to watch out for the government overprotecting us, but by the same token, it was, it consistently has been the Republican Party and conservatives who've been looking for a greater degree of this kind of social control over the rebellious elements of society. So there's this weird...
because it morphs from protection to order.
Yeah.
And that duty to order will take care of everything else. And I would point out, by the way, what was the way that communism was sold in the 50s or Stalinism ultimately, was sold in the 50s to Americans was about they will control your thoughts. They will control you. It's all about control. So we have to control ourselves way more so that they can't control us.
So that they can't come in and, Yeah.
Yeah.
We have to have our thought police.
Right.
Because our thought police are benign and their thought police
or even
aren't.
Our thought police are a necessary evil, but if we don't police our thoughts, then will we become susceptible to a foreign group thought policing us, and that'll be way worse.
Yeah.
So it's I used to play tetherball when I was a kid. And I'm
5'6" now as an adult. I'm not even going to tell you how much I hated tetherball as a kid. But anyway, sorry, continue.
There are ways that little people defeated me roundly. I've been 6 feet tall since I was 13. So.
Okay.
But when I was a kid, I played tetherball, and we had all kinds of rules. You could grab the rope. Whoever was serving got to call the rules. You could say holding. You could say pity patting, where you couldn't hold it. You tap tap tap.
Yeah.
You could say roping. You could grab it by the rope and throw it if you called that rule. But the kids who were amazing at it and who were a lot shorter than I was too, they called a game. They called rules called No Nothing. And no nothing meant you couldn't hold it. You couldn't do. The ball had to constantly be in motion. You could not touch the rope. You couldn't touch the top. You couldn't touch the pole.
It was all
the momentum.
Yeah.
Hitting and back hitting. So what would happen in tetherball? I swear this will come back around. Tetherball.
Nice.
But what would happen is Eddie was actually his name. He's a younger African American fellow. He's a fourth grader. I was a fifth grader. He just ruled the tetherball court, right? He would get it going. And if you had it in a rhythm and you could just keep going, that ball is just wrapping and wrapping.
Oh, yeah.
You couldn't
there was no way to stop
because he had the angle just right. It would go over your hands. So what you had to do, the only chance you had, and I got this by watching him because somebody else was wrapping it on him. And he's a little dude. He went to the other side of his half circle. He jumps up as it's going past him and hits it harder past him. Now, the person who was hitting it is off rhythm because it comes past their hand quicker, and then he runs back and he knocks it, and he had a way of hitting it, and it's unspun.
Oh, yeah. Jeez,
but it was that move, which absolutely reminds me of this. If we can hit ourselves harder and faster
in the other direction,
then we won't get flogged.
Nice.
And then we can control the trajectory and stuff like that. Again, back to control, back to order.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah, he's got kids. Well, he doesn't have them doing that. This is part of a national hysteria in the 40s, kind of a practicing.
This is Wortham.
Yeah,
you're talking about.
Yeah,
back to Wortham.
Yeah, this is practicing. No, this is a little Eddie. It's back to the hysteria of the late 40s. And so they have a big burning. Now in 1949, there's a guy named Gershon Legman, and he wrote a book called Love and Death. Titles were lurid as hell back then. He said in this that comic books would train kids like Pavlov's dogs. Or like Skinner's pigeons, by showing them such awful things that it would break their spirit. He also claimed that comic books distort real life and give kids, quote, blood to, quote, feed on. It's like he never met a kid.
Well, kind of like he never met a kid. See, here's the deal, though. In my own experience, you know, I mean, remembering being, a kid, 10, 11, 9.
How old were you when you first read a comic book that you can remember?
Geez.
Like where you started actually reading them serially instead of like, oh, this was at a cousin's house.
Reading them serially. Mm-hmm. I didn't really get into following comics until I was a teenager.
I was the same. Once I had my own money.
Yeah.
And I could ride my bike down to Flying Colors Comics. By the way, if you're in the Concord area, Flying Colors Comics is still around. Okay. I would ride my bike down there with my allowance and get as many comics as I could, and then buy myself an ice cream, and then ride my bike all the way back home from Concord through Walnut Creek.
Holy cow.
Yeah, it was great. It was good exercise.
Yeah.
But anyway, I was about the
burn
same
off
age.
the ice cream.
Yeah.
The first comics that I remember reading, not as like, following storylines or anything like that, would be Batman.
Okay.
Batman was my first.
Okay.
And
mine were the New Warriors.
Oh, nice.
My brother and I have a very soft spot in our heart for the New Warriors.
Yeah, well, I can understand why.
Yeah.
Batman was the first one that I can remember sitting in my living room and reading. And part of the reason I remember it is because it was when my parents noticed I was actually reading silently, and they commented on it that I was reading it, and my father remarked to my mother, you notice he hasn't said a word for half an hour.
Wow.
And I was sitting there
and
engrossed.
it just hit them like
pow. Yeah,
zap,
it was the
boom.
sudden realization that I was doing. I think I was 6. Might have been younger. I don't recall.
Sure.
But and so I mean my immersion in comics goes back that far. My real fandom is
starts later. Yeah. No, I think that's true of a lot of people though.
Yeah, and talking about what he's saying about about kids. The first statement he makes, I want to laugh at because especially and part of this is testosterone, because testosterone is a hell of a drug. The things that people say about little boys, the generalizations that get made about little boys. You give a little boy a stick, what does he turn it into?
It's a gun.
It's a gun or a sword or a weapon, because testosterone is a hell of a drug. And even in the minuscule amounts that prepubescent kids have it, it's a thing. Well, so him talking about, lurid images breaking children's spirits. Have you ever watched a group of middle schoolers try to campaign to be allowed to watch a horror movie on the last day of school? I have.
Yeah.
Like it was a concerted, they were getting a lesson in community organization that was almost entirely self-directed. They were like, okay, so you're saying if everybody gets their parents to sign this waiver, we can watch a PG-13 movie. Because seriously, I don't even remember what it was they wanted to watch. It was
Make them watch Army of Darkness next time.
Yeah, some schlocky horror flick that I was like, I'm sorry, I hate horror movies. I'm nowhere near this. Get somebody else to chaperone that. I'll be in another room.
Right. Give
me the crafts table with the 6th graders. By the way, everybody, I hate 6th graders. I want you all to understand I'm terrified of them. I don't want to deal with them. 7th graders are my people as a teacher. Also, that's kind of my level of maturity. My wife will account for that. But I wanted to be anywhere but that room. But the idea that lurid gore, all this stuff is going to break children's spirit is like, have you met an 11-year-old boy?
No.
Have you spoken to one for 10 minutes?
Oh yeah.
And then his other point after that one was it gives them blood to feed on.
Yeah.
What I find interesting about that is I can kind of see there's a seed of something kind of factual, kind of true in that, but he's blowing it out of proportion, and
he's
in
taking
a big way,
anecdote and calling it science,
and calling it science, and I think there is an impact that images and storylines and that kind of stuff can have on psychology, but it's much more subtle and much more fleeting. If you talk to a kid 10 minutes after he's read an EC horror comic and you ask him a series of questions, he's going to have a set of answers, and they're going to be influenced by what he just read. They're going to be, more lurid, more whatever than they would have been before he read the comic book. But if you then ask him the same questions a day later,
you're back to zero.
You'd be back to baseline. And what I find interesting that I'm going to go into a little bit more is this is the same argument that's been used with other media ever since.
Oh yes.
So.
Oh yeah. So the U.S. federal government saw a panic, and they've never seen a panic they didn't like, so they jumped in on it.
Politicians have never seen a panic they don't like,
because they represent us.
Let's
be real.
And that gets people to the polls.
So they jumped in 1950. Now there's a U.S. Senate special committee that was already doing an investigation into organized crime, and I find this fascinating. One part of the investigation looked into the effects that crime comics had. So here you've got, crime. Yep. You've got the effects of crime comics. So, are we breeding juvenile delinquency into our kids with our literature? Your detective comics and or the comics that dealt with bad guys being rich people, essentially. Which, to me, there's a bit of a Marxist bend to me.
Really?
Yeah, a bit.
I hadn't picked up on that.
A little bit. It's not without its flaws, but if you look at the senators, the ruling class is looking at the influence that popular literature, accessible and free, virtually free to anybody, because a lot of kids would just sit there in the drugstore and just line up sitting down because the money was at that time in the soda fountain.
Yeah.
So they didn't care if the kids read the comics or not, or bought them or not. But they're looking at what the proles are reading and seeing if that affects how they feel about the rich ones. There's a thing going on.
I see what you're saying, and I think on a, I think that.
I don't think it's
probably
conscious.
Yeah, I think that's on certainly on a subconscious level. I think a lot of the stuff that Marxism wants to attribute to class conflict, class warfare, that kind of stuff. I think there's something to that idea. I think straight up Marxists make it more overt than it actually is.
Well, I have a few friends who are Marxists. We should have them on.
There you go. Yeah, that'll be great. Yeah. They'll love the hell out of me. Yeah. Oh, Jesus.
Oh, they're nice.
But
no, I get what you're saying though. I think it's a matter of programming versus intent.
Okay.
I would bridge the gap there.
I think that works. Yeah.
So they are looking at this, and one judge on the committee. So they call these people in for these committees, right? And one of them stated that he had cases where boys had committed a crime that was patterned after one depicted in a comic book. So anecdotes are a thing.
Yeah.
Right? And so the anecdotes are a thing that work.
Yes.
Anecdotes are a thing that work still.
Yes. Unfortunately.
According to him, kids could reasonably say that the comics made them do it.
There's is an ontological leap. There's a
huge
leap there.
Like where's Zeno when you need him?
Yeah, I'm sorry, you left several steps out of
you
the
still didn't
train.
go halfway.
You didn't get even
And the little bastards would get sympathy and not have as harsh a sentence. Not on his watch. That was his logic. Was not so much that it's corrupting them, but that it could make other judges feel sympathetic because, little Timmy
Poor kid's mind has been warped by these hideous
let's
devil
not
books.
let's not punish him enough. So it didn't even get to the this is bad for the kids. It got to the
this is threatening to the mechanisms of law and order.
And order and order and order.
Yeah.
And law became a mechanism of order.
Order. Yeah.
Dr. Wortham's book rides this wave to prominence.
Became a bestseller. Yeah, it was.
Huge.
He retired basically on the sales of that book. He didn't have to do. He really probably didn't have to work another day in his life.
Yeah.
Fear sells, man.
Oh God, yeah.
I mean, I'd argue fear sells better than sex, and we all know that the line is sex sells.
Yeah. Well,
fear is a hell of a lot better.
And again, we go back to fear and desire.
Yeah.
So in 1954, it claims that his book claims that his studies with children. That comic books were a major cause of juvenile delinquency. He's really just driving this home. And really what this was guilt by association. So kids who had committed crimes also read comic books.
That's because all kids were reading comic books.
Exactly.
That was the medium at the time.
Like, you don't see people blaming Catcher in the Rye for Mark David Chapman.
No, you don't.
Or the guy who shot Ronald Reagan.
Well, and here's the deal.
Whose name I don't remember because he didn't succeed.
Yeah.
Hinckley.
John Hinckley.
John Hinckley doesn't get a middle name because he didn't succeed.
Yeah. Oh, Lord.
Yeah. But we're not blaming Jodie Foster for that. We're not blaming Catcher in the Rye,
I think something, again, going back to what we talked about in the first episode, what I brought up in the first episode, because it's a major sticking point for me, is the art form in our culture. Again, being in this kiddie ghetto, TV tropes, children's ghetto, kids ghetto. The art form is for children.
And I'm going to get to this point in a few minutes. Yeah.
Since it is an art form for children,
right.
It is automatically less legitimate, less important, less meaningful, lesser in all of these ways. And we don't blame Catcher in the Rye for John Hinckley or the other guy you mentioned that's already gone in.
Mark David Chapman.
Mark David Chapman. We don't blame Catcher in the Rye for them because, see, that's part of the American canon.
Right.
That's literature.
Well, because by that time, any adult who reads that's not going to think I should go impress Jodie Foster by killing someone.
Yeah.
Like that, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And
adults would have good judgment.
Yes.
Children haven't developed it yet.
Yeah. And
therefore they're more
susceptible and whatever.
Yeah.
And everything else I want to say I think would be better done later on.
Okay.
But yeah, it's a really big thing to me that certain media, certain art forms are stuck in this position where they can be saddled with this responsibility because they're not taken seriously. It's this weird it's this weird two-sided kind of thing where well, this is for kids, so whatever, we're not going to take it seriously. But then at the same time, and again, this is part of that fear desire duality kind of thing going on.
Sure.
Is at the same time, well, because it's kids are malleable, kids are all this other stuff, and so if this is trashy, then oh my god, that's dangerous, and suddenly we take it really seriously.
When we do our episode on Saturday morning cartoons, we're going to come back to this.
Oh, hard.
Big time.
Big, yeah. So
yeah, most kids read comic books. This is just a fact, including the ones who became delinquents. But also kids who went on to be Eagle Scouts or fight for the country or have sex with blonde women. They also read comic books. Which was apparently the goal in the 50s. Like, if you watch a lot of movies...
Well, yeah.
Yeah. I got a thing for brunettes. I don't know.
Yeah, well, my wife is a brunette. So,
there you see. I got a thing for your wife.
Yeah.
What?
Wait, hold on.
We're going to scrub that part out.
Yeah.
But Dr. Wortham was doing some serious confirmation biasing.
Oh.
Huge.
Really?
And so the comic books caused the children to become delinquents.
Yeah.
But he wasn't done. According to Wortham, comic books were messing with their understanding of physics. Which I love. Because Superman could now fly. And so he said, and I remember when I was growing up, people had a problem with Wile E. Coyote.
Yeah.
Like, straight up. Like, because he kept living.
Like, because he survived all those falls.
And I even remember back when Dennis Miller was mildly funny. So this is way
long time ago.
Yeah. But he talked about how a child was found at the bottom of the Grand Canyon with springs attached to his feet.
Nice.
I don't think it actually happened.
I don't.
But,
yeah, no.
But yeah, so he said that they were implementing and reinforcing homosexual thoughts because Robin was drawn with bare legs. And often
Escándalo!
And often sitting in a very spread Robin kind of position.
I see what you did there.
Yeah, unfortunately, you did actually see what I did there. I've been wearing these green underwear for just this joke. And he also seemed solely attached to the older Batman. And so,
okay,
yeah,
and he's an orphan,
right?
So
and it's
not
again
a lot
convention,
of other adult figures,
right?
It's and again conventions of the art form
at the time
being completely overlooked.
But this is accusing Paris's wife of being a witch. You've gone too far.
Yeah.
The hysteria goes to the point where now you're accusing everybody of it.
Yeah,
Which, by the way, that play was written in the 50s as well.
And this is where I want to jump in.
Please.
With Army McCarthy hearings.
Oh.
I did not realize this, but the Army McCarthy hearings were during April-May 1954.
Yes.
Which is the same time as the beginning of the Senate Subcommittee on Juvenile Delinquency.
That's right.
So this is happening at the same time. Now, it's important to note that the Army McCarthy hearings were the point at which McCarthy himself was famously confronted with the phrase, "Have you no decency, sir? At long last, have you no sense of decency?"
I just love that they let him get to that point before asking.
Yeah.
Like
wait, what? Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was him going after
Marshall.
Well,
he went after Marshall.
He went after Marshall. He went after a whole bunch of people. But what finally wound up doing it was he tried to badger the Defense Department's lawyer, the head of the Defense Department's legal team, about a junior lawyer in his firm who had been a member of a legal association in his youth that had tenuous ties to the Comintern.
Probably did like a canned food drive to help the Russians during the war.
Well, it was a little bit more than that, but it was he had been a member of this association. Sure. This association during previous hearings had been shown to have ties to communist organizations. And so this was a young, essentially in Washington terms, a young kid, guy in his late 20s, early 30s, who McCarthy was now trying to badger the Army's lawyer about, and it was finally, look, this guy works for me. I'm vouching for him. I'm telling you, this was something he did. Well, he was probably older than in his 20s or 30s.
He's been vetted, though.
He's been vetted. You know, are you just going to, I mean, can you just let it go? Right. You know, I mean, the more political version of, can you just please not?
Right.
You know, and
it's also the political version of yelling at a dachshund for barking at the door, though. That's
kind.
Their job.
I mean, yeah, but you know, in a practical sense, because these hearings, the Wortham hearings, weren't, which I think would have been interesting historically if they had been, because that would have, things may have gone a little bit differently in that case. But the Harmony McCarthy hearings were broadcast on live TV,
right? And
people finally actually saw McCarthy in full form, being the sweating,
frothing,
bullying, foaming at the mouth blowhard that he was, and that image was what led to his downfall, censure by the Senate, and everything else. And it's interesting that you're talking about the Wortham eventually going to that place where he was accusing everybody,
of everything,
his wife of and that was basically what led to McCarthy having the same fate. It's the same cycle.
It is.
It's the same cycle.
You can plot it out.
You can.
It's like a really jacked up version of the hero's journey.
Yeah, and I like that. That's good. And people with more letters after their name and us and more erudition have mapped it out. I mean, it's a known.
It's
kind
a
of
quantifiable
cycle,
thing.
thing. Yeah. But it was interesting to me doing my admittedly not as thorough as I'd like research for this that these things happened at the same time. That's
a really good point.
That this panic about juvenile delinquency, which is tied to this kind of nebulous thing about organized crime.
Right.
This particular panic about the enemy within,
right, being
our kids who we have to keep control on, is going on in tandem. I mean, at the same time as the very overt, because the fear of your kids is something that's covert. It's something you don't really, you say, I'm worried about kids being turned into delinquents. What you don't say is, I'm afraid of my kids.
Right.
I'm afraid of other people's kids.
Right.
Because that's not socially acceptable. That's
you're
not,
absolutely right. It can be implied.
It can be implied.
Right.
And it can be sub rosa, but it's not anything that you're ever going to openly admit to, unless you're a school teacher. In which case, you'll talk to your peers and say, dude, they're crazy. But
I would like to point out that the non-Latin teacher has used more Latin in our podcast than the Latin teacher.
Yeah.
Please carry on.
Okay. Not to worry. Because, in bits and phrases, it's very useful. As, like, trying to use it as a spoken language, you might as well use it as battlefield code. Oh, wait, the Romans did! So, and I got sidetracked by my witty remark about battlefield code, but... the fear of your children, your fear of other people's children is not something you can. Yeah, is not something you can say aloud. The fear of, oh my God, the commies, is something you can say out loud, and that was what grabbed the big time front page headlines. The Wortham stuff was going on at the exact same time.
That's true.
It was part of the same neurosis, same
zeitgeist,
same zeitgeist.
Yeah.
I'm going to say mass neurosis because
I think you're right.
Better, it was part of the same set of subconscious fears, but it would have been buried on page 4, page 5. It wouldn't have been
the funnies.
Yeah, yes, near the funny pages. So I mean, the biggest thing I wanted to point out in regard to the McCarthy hearings and their relationship to this is that these are mirror images of each other.
Absolutely.
These are, I mean, not even mirror images because that implies reversal. These are carbon copies almost. Of one
this is an elder and a younger.
Yeah, basically. So
the Nightwing to the Batman, as it were.
Yes, as it were.
Wortham also went off on Wonder Woman, said that she was giving little girls the wrong ideas about a woman's place in society.
Wow.
Which I always thought that was hilarious because like her one weakness is if she's ever bound up by a man, which seemed to happen in every other comic. So
well, that's because her writer had a thing for that.
Yeah, actually.
Which is in fact documented.
Yeah. There's a movie out about it now. There are several books about it.
And
connecting her to Margaret Sanger. There's all kinds of cool shit.
Yeah,
with it.
and the weird relationship that he had
with his mistress and her cousin or something like that. It was.
Well, the deal was he was married. I mean, this is my understanding of it. I'm sure we'll get commentary about me screwing this up, but my understanding of it was.
I love your optimism that people will listen to this.
Well, hey, I'm going to plug the hell out of it, so we'll see. And plenty of my friends are hardcore nerds about this stuff. So, but he was married. They had children, and the mistress was their babysitter.
Right.
And what is interesting about that is he was, for the time period, really open about the fact that I'm sleeping with both of them.
They were both
three-way
cool with
relationship. It too. They were both cool with it. I think the historical record says they were both cool with it. I would like, based on
the fact
I'd really like to read, because again, it's still the 50s, and as much as or late 40s into the 50s, as much as he was a very feminist kind of thinker about what a woman's role ought to be and not confining girls to the kitchen and all that stuff.
Sure.
He was still the man of the house.
He's also he's the guy with the ukulele at the party telling women what feminism is.
Yeah, I kind of get that feeling, and I'd really like to see some kind of a primary source, like a diary entry from his wife or something, talking about her being okay with it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. I couldn't find Wortham saying anything about media and S&M, oddly enough. So there were some people that fought back. Publishers of comic books, because again, there's no CCA yet.
Well, as part of the hearings, the publisher of EC. This is my favorite anecdote about the hearings, and you probably got it in your notes somewhere. But he was questioned by a senator, holding up, a placard of a comic book cover.
Yes,
the really famous one with the blonde woman,
right?
Having been beheaded, in the hatch as they were in the frame. And having this back and forth about would you not say this is in poor taste? He says, well, I think it could be, and the details that he mentions are ones that he had actually told the illustrator to remove from the cover before it got, but because the original cover had actually included all of these elements that are in poor taste.
So it's like that scene from Spinal Tap.
Yeah,
you should have seen the cover they wanted.
Yeah, oh my God. Yeah, and so, yeah, it's interesting that, people did fight back and
some of the voices of reason were actual senators, which is rare. But they said that his study only studied juvenile delinquents without comparing them to the other kids.
So his response
was so classically 50s, though. He said the kids who didn't become delinquents may even be worse off.
What the fuck?
I know.
How is it? I mean, right now in this podcast, I just used language that, I was raised not to. Well, I'm not worried about that. But that people in that room had to think that, and it was the 50s.
Well, he was doubling down.
He
was doubling down, because he was hoping some people would be like, no, he's probably right. Yeah, because we're all afraid of kids too.
Because but how is it
right
that we don't have? What I want to know is, how do we not have the recording of somebody actually clamping a hand over a mic to shout what the fuck? I mean, to that point, how do we not hear somebody in the background going, "Are you fucking kidding?"
You can't have it both ways, sir.
How do you
have no sensibility?
Have you no? Yeah.
So
have you no sense of realities?
Now, what I want to come back to is the horror comics.
Yeah.
Because the horror comics are one of the big reasons. Because again, there's no superhero comics really.
Yeah.
There's a few
at that point,
but it's mostly horror comics, right? And this is what's really, really getting pumped out. At the time, there were a lot of horror comic books on the market, and they were showing pretty gruesome things. But what nobody seemed to get was that the kids weren't reading those. The adults were.
Well, because no adult wanted to admit to reading comic books.
Partly. Yeah, you're absolutely the ghettoization of the art.
Yeah.
But this goes back to what you were talking about with the Japanese comics, right?
Yeah.
So here's the thing. During World War II, a lot of soldiers were reading comic books. It was a good morale booster. It was good for entertainment. When they came back, these soldiers kept reading comic books. Now, their tastes had changed. They don't need to read about a war. They've been through it. So now, and again, they want to read about what they just saw with Susie at the Five and Dime and stuff like that. So it was mainly for this audience that horror comics were even written. Yeah. They weren't written for the kids. Mom and Dad still had a say in what little Timmy brought home. Yeah. Mom still cleaned Timmy's room. Yeah. I found these comics. I don't ever want you buying them again. He'd either find a better hiding place, or he'd only read them over there, or he would bring home Archie and Jughead, you know? Still, the U.S. government was poised and ready to overreact on behalf of children, like they always do, which is kind of quaint now that we have...
Except in terms of gun violence.
Well, there's that. It's quaint now because we have kids who've been abducted and put into detention facilities away from their parents with no real timetable or infrastructure to return them by the very same government. So, you know, it's maybe that was when America was great. But Wortham testified before the Senate. Other people did too, including people in the comic book industry. But Wortham, he's a psychologist. He knows how to work a room. He knows how to whip a Fuhrer. He totally outclassed them. Also, the people who were testifying for the comic books were businessmen. They were the business side of the comic book industry. They weren't the artists. Very few artists actually testified. And it was mostly the guys at the head of the comic book companies who didn't know what they were publishing. They were just counting the beans. The Senate committee advised the comic book companies that, quote, a competent job of self-policing within the industry will achieve much. Now, 15 years later, you get the MPAA doing the exact same thing for movies.
Now, what I want to point out here real quick is the decision to found the CCA actually happened prior to all of these hearings, because people in the publishing industry had gotten wind of the fact... Caught the scent of it coming and had said, okay, look, they're going to clamp down on us. We don't want to deal with them actually regulating any of the stuff, so we got to do something. They agreed and had started forming the CCA even before Wortham got his chance to get up in front of the tape recorder microphones and not TV cameras, but, you know, the press to do his dog and pony show.
So October 26, 1954, the CCA starts. It prohibits the following things: graphic depictions of violence, gore, sexual innuendo, vampires, werewolves, zombies, ghouls, sexual abnormalities, seduction, etc. So that means the horror industry is wiped out of comic books.
Gone.
Which leaves a vacuum for superheroes, ultimately, again. And you'll start to see that popping back up in things like Journey into Mystery and Tales of Suspense. Suddenly you have superheroes in them instead of these one-off stories. It discouraged and here's a fun one, any challenge to authority, any depiction of police as being corrupt, politicians as being mean, judges as being dirty. So all the things that the superheroes fought against in the 40s wiped out because order. Also, it encouraged romance, but only if it led to marriage. And also the CCA said that good must triumph over evil in every instance. This is where superheroes are made, man. Like, they come back, and in the beginning, like, I have an app on my iPad, and I can read all the Marvel comics ever, basically. Yeah. It's wonderful. I've been reading them all from the beginning, and they're shit. They're awful. They really are.
Well, you know, if there's no chance of the hero losing, then there's no tension. There's no stakes.
There's no carryover either. That's the thing. Like, it all has to be solved. And what happens is
a self-contained unit.
In the last 3 panels, they solve it every time, and it is, oh my god, it's so unimaginative. But that's what they had to deal with. In 1955, the Senate committee gives its final report, stating that it approves of the CCA. Even though it represents, and not even though, but because it represents, quote, steps in the right direction. Now, this does not mean that the Senate agreed with Wortham completely. They saw problems in his study. They basically, lawmakers back then actually read about things and thought about things. So they didn't fully endorse Wortham's conclusions about the effects of comic books on children. And they pointed out, dude, you only studied juvenile delinquents. Yeah. The Senate committee did agree, though, that comic books might have an unhealthy effect on kids that were already emotionally disturbed or morally delinquent. But they also said it's nothing conclusive. This is only intuitive. And you can kind of make that argument intuitively.
Yeah.
But I don't know that you want to legislate to that.
No.
And they didn't. To their credit, they didn't. It was, you're going to do it yourself?
You fixed it. We don't need to do anything.
So they backed the self-policing by the comic book publishers. Their final report also issued a warning to comic book companies saying, if this doesn't work, that we're going to revisit the issue, and by whatever means necessary, we will, quote, prevent our nation's young from being harmed from crime and horror comic books. So, essentially, we can't prove that you're bad for kids, but we're assuming that you're bad for kids who are also already on the fence. And unless you fix what we can't prove is bad for kids, we're going to come back and fix you.
Wow.
Yeah.
Talk about having it both ways.
That's the
like
government.
Politically, yeah, well.
So CCA puts its stamp on every comic book that meets its guidelines, which means that horror comics don't meet these guidelines. Graphic depictions of violence, gore, sexual innuendo, vampires, werewolves, zombies, ghouls, sexual abnormalities, etc. don't get you the stamp. And here's how it works. If you don't have the stamp, stores and newsstands won't accept your comic books. They won't put them on the shelves. They won't sell. So now the publisher eats all the costs of publication, and they're not going to do that.
Well, they're not going to, if they're not going to make any money off of it, if they can't distribute them. Yeah, well, and
horror comic publishers go out of business.
Cool. Well, yeah, and for the art form, and for the medium, maybe is a better term than art form, but for the medium, this is the beginning of where we get modern comic book culture, because it's in the 60s, 70s, and later when storylines start evolving again. That you start seeing people wanting to read about more mature themes, about other stuff. Marvel famously, Stan Lee famously got a waiver to write about drug addiction.
Yeah, and it was a horrible episode.
Well,
but it's still
it's a milestone. And what you then get is, comic books aren't something. They're this special thing. They're this weird, not really magazines, not really cartoons, and you start seeing the beginnings of comic book stores.
Right.
Rather than comic books being on the shelf with other magazines.
Good point. Speaking of magazines. Others adapted. There's like, it's a comic book code authority. It's not a magazine authority. So Mad Magazine became Mad Magazine. And CCA had no authority over that.
Yeah.
And so they could be very subversive.
Thumb their nose at authority.
Their very existence was subversive. Never mind the content. Bill Gaines, who had actually been a teacher and had argued in front of the Senate committee that comics didn't have a negative impact, and he actually brought, information. He gets moving on that. It's really, horror comics get really toned down. Magazines just go crazy. They have fun. But it's very vanilla. There's no real horror. Marvel Comics was one of the companies that was still producing horror comics as well as, quote, sci-fi comics. But they're really tame. I mean, really tame. And they start going more for superheroes. And this really sets the tone for the next 40 years.
Yeah.
So, it's like you're saying. This is where you get your comic book culture in a major way. Now, I told you at the beginning of the last podcast that the other title is this, Why Does My Dad Hate Adlai Stevenson?
Yes. I've been waiting eagerly to learn about this.
So at these committee hearings, there is a publicity-hungry senator who wants desperately to be president. His name is Estes Kefauver.
Kefauver, however you say it.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm a Latinist.
Yeah,
we don't have a letter K in Latin.
Yeah, okay.
Fuck it. He's from Tennessee.
Yes.
Interesting thing there. He rails against, quote, indecent and scurrilous literature. And he points out that the crime rate is up, particularly in areas associated with juveniles. And this is burglary and auto theft. And he was right. These things are happening. And it goes back to that fear of the children like you talked about. Now, again, he doesn't make any really worthwhile claims of his causation, but just correlation. And he totally steals the spotlight from Wortham. So Wortham thinks he's going to make himself. And Kefauver's like, that's nice.
It turned into Kefauver's. I mean, Kefauver wound up getting the chairmanship of the hearings, if I remember correctly.
Well, and he's a weird guy, and I'm going to get to him a little bit. But he is your 1950s conformity-conscious American politician. And he sets himself up cartoonishly at times, which is fun, against what he sees as like this seamy underbelly of popular culture of the 50s. He's the dad who bans dancing in Flashdance.
Yeah.
He's that guy, right?
That's a good analogy, yeah.
The weird thing is he's one of only 3 Democratic senators who refused to sign the Southern Manifesto. Southern Manifesto is the document that Southern senators and congressmen said that they wrote down, here's what we're going to do. We're going to oppose Brown versus Board with the law as hard as they could.
Yeah.
Amongst other dumb shit that it said it is destroying, Brown versus Board, it is destroying the amicable relations between the whites and the Negro races that have been created through 90 years of patient effort by the good people of both races. It has planted hatred and suspicion where there has been heretofore friendship and understanding.
Oh, fuck that.
He didn't sign it.
Okay.
The other two guys who didn't sign it,
Yeah.
Al Gore Sr.
Okay.
and Lyndon Johnson.
Wow.
There were a couple of Republicans that didn't sign it as well, but this is about Kefauver. So he also was, and there were several House of Reps guys that didn't, about a dozen. He was on the organized crime committees.
Yes.
Now, if you've seen Godfather Part 2, that's the committees.
Yeah.
And that's what ties into the comic books, right? He had chops. He actually was a populist who cared about the people. He was doing good governance.
Yeah.
He overreached here.
Yeah.
Here he overreached. I think he got tricked. Or not tricked, but like it's kind of like you can lead a dog to do the wrong thing.
Yeah, I think...
And that's what he did.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy.
And he was a weird dude, like in a lot of this. Like, he often held hearings on things that didn't warrant in-depth investigations. For instance, he had the Switchblade hearings. Which
Switchblade knives, oh god.
Yeah, he had those. Yeah. And he brandished for the press various lethal objects, including bayonets, to talk about how dangerous switchblades are.
Okay, because they're pointy?
I guess.
Because they're both...
knifey?
What do they have in... Yeah,
I mean... So the New Yorker said that his activity in the comic book hearings was, quote, an investigation conducted by the senators that had been compared to a court run by kangaroos. And the analogy is not unfair, except possibly to the kangaroos. The normal rules of evidence do not apply in congressional hearings. Badgering is appreciated. The verdict has frequently been arrived at in advance, and the Senate committee was determined to indict the makers of comic books, and the hearing was designed as a spectacle. So that's Kefauver.
Yeah.
What were you going to say?
Well, just... Yeah, my reading about Kefauver is he's a complex guy. Mm-hmm. Side note in regard to his role politically, he was also involved in the destruction of a democratic machine in his state.
Yeah,
because
the guys with the guns that.
Yeah. There's that, but there's also just on a more basic political note, the democratic machine. In his state wound up trying to come for him because they didn't appreciate his law and order. There was something about his particular brand of, I'm for law and order kind of record. And they wound up trying to get him unelected. They threw all their support behind his opponent, and he used that as a weapon in getting reelected. He famously wound. I don't remember the name of the guy running the machine, but the guy running the machine basically had said, this guy's. He used the term a pet coon.
Wow.
And so Kefauver wore a coonskin cap to a press conference. Yeah. Cold brain. Wore a coonskin cap to a press conference or put it on in front of the press and said, I may be a pet coon, but I ain't his pet coon.
Nice.
As an indictment against his
populist.
opponent who was, it's a remarkable thing looking back on all of that.
Sure.
With, 50, 60 years of hindsight, how much our political discourse has changed.
Yeah.
And in some ways, how much it hasn't.
Yeah.
It's a reminder to me as a historian that this is a different time. We don't think a lot of the time about the 50s, modern American history.
Right.
Doesn't get treated like a different time.
True.
But dude, it was. And I think that's something that I take away from talking about Kefauver is he was a politician of a completely different era.
Yeah. Well, and he was out of step with politicians at the time too.
Yeah.
Hence his success.
Yeah.
So my dad read comics both from before and after the code because my dad was born in, I believe, 42.
Okay.
So he's reading comic books through his childhood. So like by the time he's 12, that's when the code kicks in, right? He didn't like that the government got into that stuff, and he pinned it all on Kefauver. Okay. Kefauver had run for president twice, losing the Democratic nomination in 52 and 56. He lost to Adlai Stevenson both times.
Yep.
And in 1956, he becomes Adlai Stevenson's vice presidential running mate. Now, my dad's older brother is 2 years older than him, so he would have been old enough to vote. I'm not sure if he did, but my dad was still 2 years out. But my dad was a lifelong Democrat all his life. I mean, he grew up in San Francisco. It's a very Democratic town. The only time he wasn't was when Reagan ran against Mondale. He told me only recently, he's like, your mom would kill me if I told you. The funny thing is, my mom also told me, your dad would kill me
if you found out,
And I'm like, I think you both made a mistake. But my dad was a lifelong Democrat. He was anti-Adlai Stevenson because of his connection to Kefauver. So in 1963, Kefauver dies. I told you the journey was much more worth than the payoff.
It's still, I find it entertaining. It's a great personal kind of hook.
Yeah. Kefauver dies of a heart attack. He dies a few days later. He's speaking on the floor of the Senate in 1963, has a heart attack. He dies at the age of 60. My dad, not upset.
Great way to put that. I like it. Yeah.
So that's kind of what got us the comic book code. Now I have a little bit about the legacy, but I see in your notes that you do as well.
I want to get into that as well.
So the legacy of the comic book code is frankly, it deserves its own episodes. But for starters, it did something that you and I both came to appreciate, as it rejuvenated superheroes.
Yeah,
they were languishing. They didn't exist really. They a little bit, but. Like, the explosion of superheroes happens as a result of the vacuum left by there shall be no horror or sex.
Yeah.
And because superheroes were one of the only few acceptable formats. They always won. They always were on the side of justice and what have you from the 60s to the 70s. Things changed in the 70s, and we can get into that in another podcast.
And in another podcast, specifically, I want to talk about Batman.
Oh, absolutely.
Because it's after the code that we see, the shift in focus in who his rogues gallery was full of.
Right.
That's when we really start to see the beginnings of super villains. Because, again, of the restrictions of the CCA.
Absolutely. Secondly, it makes storytelling really boring.
Yes.
Which means a lot of cloning between competing brands. It also kills off most of the other brands. So you end up with just DC and Marvel, and they have similarities that continue for like the next 40 years. Plastic Man and Mr. Fantastic, Thanos and Darkseid, Moon Knight and Batman, Deadpool and that other guy. Brainiac.
Deadshot? Yeah, you mean Deadshot?
I think so.
Deadshot. Who came first?
Yeah, I know.
I just want to point out who came first.
And I mentioned Moon Knight, even though Batman came first. I get you. Brainiac and Leader.
Leader's a deep cut.
Thirdly, it anchors Marvel and DC as the two big fish in the pond, and everyone else just kind of flitters away.
Everybody else spells comics with an X on the end because they can't compete financially.
Which is horrible for the artists because they basically just decide who to get dicked over by.
Yeah.
By leaving and coming back over and over. Now, all of this eventually leads to comic book fans growing up.
Yes.
And
chronologically.
And developing their own comic formats, though.
Yes.
Alan Moore is directly responding to what he grew up and bemoaning. It gave creative agitation to people who wanted to do more with the medium.
Yeah.
Which ultimately leads to graphic novels as a critically acceptable medium. Like at my school, we actually teach a few graphic novels as part of the curriculum. There's Mouse 2. There's what's it called? It's Polis. I forget exactly.
Persepolis.
Persepolis. Thank you.
An amazing piece of work.
Oh, it's terrific. Which ultimately separates it from comic books, which forces comic books to catch up. And by the time comic books catch up to graphic novels are not bound by the CCA, and comic books in the early 2000s stopped caring about the CCA as well. And now we live in a world without the CCA.
Yeah.
So its own legacy created its own destruction.
Well, yeah, it did. I think as far as legacy goes, the biggest thing that struck me looking at this was that here we're talking about comic books. Here we're talking about, oh my God, we have to protect our children from this lurid sex, violence, all this horrible stuff. And then, so that was in 54. In 1985, it's interesting. It's interesting that you mentioned Al Gore Sr. Because in 1985, the PMRC, which I've written down here and I didn't write down what it stood for, but it was the Washington Wives, led by Tipper Gore, wife of Senator Al Gore Jr., appeared before the Senate Commerce, Science, and Transportation Committee in September of 1985.
Commerce, Science, and Transportation.
Commerce, Science, and Transportation.
Okay.
And they appeared before the committee to argue for regulation or some kind of limitation being put on the music industry. They wanted...
Parents Music Resource Center.
Thank you.
Yeah.
They called for labeling,
yes,
like the CCA tag. They wanted labels put on record albums that contained references to graphic sex, foul language, and everything else. You know, everything that the CCA had talked about. If music included it, they wanted it. You know, they wanted it labeled. Which
is a logical extension, quite honestly.
It is. It's very much a logical extension. And what I find interesting is the Cold War was still going on. It's 1985. The hysteria of the Cold War had gone away largely, and we were in that place where it's like, well, yes, we've just all grown up with the understanding that you know, we don't know. You know, but you and I grew up in this era where, you know, well, we have the safety of mutually assured destruction. The Russians love their children too.
Love that's safe.
Well, yeah, but you know,
right.
But that was kind of, you know, the understanding was the Russians love their children too.
Right.
To quote Sting, you know, paraphrase Sting because he phrased it as a question. But it's like, you know, they're not going to do anything to end the world. We're not going to do anything to end the world. As long as we're both capable of ending the world, we're okay. Which, like. You know, and any number of comedians and writers and poets and everybody has gone on about how mad that is, but that gave us a
mad mutually assured destruction.
It gave us perhaps a false sense of security, but it gave us a sense of security. So there wasn't the hysteria about you know death from the sky at any moment. But what do you know what the album was or the song was that motivated Tipper Gore to start this crusade?
I'm going to say it was something by Frank Zappa.
No.
Zappa
appeared before the committee.
Okay.
Famously. Him and Dee Snider are the two best known. Oh, Dee Snider showed up in full Twisted Sister regalia.
Nice.
With, you know, his sharpened teeth and his whole 9 yards. And he basically, I mean, he did everything but throw the finger to Mrs. Gore. It was really, it's an amazing bit of
what was the album?
Theater. Darling Nikki by Prince was the song off the album Purple Rain.
Wow. Which absolutely ties into all kinds of racial shit.
Yeah, doesn't it though? And of course one of the, you know, you remember from the debate at the time, you know, the two art forms, the two subgenres of music that were terrifying people the most. And Darling Nikki doesn't really fall into either one of these, but the two that they like clamped down on were metal.
Right.
Which is, you know,
very white,
very white. You know, and it's rock and roll from the 50s and A+ Ultra with like all of the violence and all of the, you know. Interestingly, of course, you know, the band's covers that they showed were, you know, Def Leppard and Wasp, which like the Wasp cover. You look at the Wasp cover and you're like. Okay, I can see why that might be kind of troubling. It's, you know, nearly naked, you know, woman, all that. And then the Def Leppard album was Pyromania.
Oh, wow.
Which the artwork famously has, you know, crosshairs and a burning building in the background.
Right.
But the other art form...
Now Fox News uses that to let us know who's running as a Democrat.
Everything, yeah. And the other art form that elicited all of this, you know, panic...
I'm going to assume was rap.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the other, and you know, the artists that got named, one of the groups that was, you know, all over everybody talking.
Run DMC by this point, right?
Well, Run DMC was, I think, probably the most widely known.
Okay.
group, but they weren't the ones that elicited the moral panic so much. It was Two Live Crew.
Oh, so we're talking 89, 88.
Well, yeah, I mean, they came along later, but you know,
I remember.
But that was, you know, the same moral panic when they were still talking about, oh my God, we got to label this stuff.
Right.
You know, and so there's this, you know, because...
You know, Aerosmith came out. I remember they got an award, and they said, we would just like to thank Tipper Gore because for every sticker she guarantees put on our albums is another million sold.
Yep.
So there you go.
And continuing that on going forward since the 1990s, and I'm spitballing with the date here, but since the 1990s, the other art form that has, you know, taken up the flag of being the villain in terms of what's corrupting our kids is video games.
Oh yeah.
And so there's this never-ending cycle of there's this new art form.
It's acceptable art.
Introduced. Yeah, it's acceptable art.
Yeah.
People get panicked about it because it's being consumed by kids. Now, metal music, rap at the time, comic books in their day, and now video games all have this association with youth culture. They all have this association with young people.
That's true.
You know, even though an awful lot of metalheads I know are
and
our
young
age
people
or older.
Congregating too.
Yeah, and young people getting together.
When you're gaming, you're playing with other 12-year-olds who also had sex with your mom.
Yeah. Well, all of them did. I mean, dude, you know.
That's how you get to play Call of Duty.
You get, or you know, Fortnite or whatever. Yeah. You know, and so, you know, it's this thing that I think it's important for those of us who spend time thinking to keep in mind that all of this has happened before and all of this will happen again. To paraphrase actually quote BSG, but apply it in a different context.
Sure.
All of this has happened before and all of this will happen again. Like so much else in history, there's always going to be something that kids are into that older folks are like, I don't understand this.
Therefore,
it disrupts order. It disrupts order. It makes me uncomfortable. Therefore, it must be evil.
Yep.
You know, and that's just youth.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, I know I'm guilty of it, talking about, you know, my students having access to Snapchat and social media during the day in school.
Right.
I'm of the opinion, you know, the phones need to stay at home or be locked up or something during the school day because it's order. It's order. Yeah. It's order. And, you know, as much as I want to try to be open-minded about it, I want them to get all off my lawn, damn it. And, you know.
No, it makes sense. I mean, I teach a dead language that I'm trying to bring back into the lexicon, not as a language, but like into academia. It used to be a regularly taught thing.
Yeah.
And now it's not. And so I use all kinds of new ways, new disruptive ways, new ways that challenge the order to make it palatable to the kids. So, you know, I'm on the other side of my tetherball ring, hitting the ball a little extra so that I have some say over how this new chaos, and I say chaos loosely because it's just order that I don't understand. Yeah. But how this new chaos is going to be played, so I'm trying to co-opt it for the good of the children. So
dangerous phrase that.
Yeah. Well, that was depressing.
A little bit.
And bleak.
So now that we've thoroughly depressed everybody with our, you know, ending of our discussion about the CCA, what do you have as a final takeaway?
I really like about the very last thing that you said there about how this has all happened before, this will all happen again. I really like the link that you made, connecting the different art forms and honestly connecting that with what you and I have talked about regarding the need for order by the adults and the fear of the children and the chaos that they represent, just even on a micro level in our own households.
Yeah.
How about yourself?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is looking at this kind of with fresh eyes and being reminded of, like I said, the cyclical nature of history, and just the fact that this is a thing that has occurred before and that the forces that are behind it, that were behind it at the time, are ones that have not ever gone away and are never going to go away. Again, the BSG quote, all of this has happened before, all of this will happen again. And the fact that we need to pay attention to the underlying psychohistory of it all to get science fiction geeky about it.
Yeah.
And know kind of what to be looking for, which is the curse of those of us who study history, is to watch those who didn't study history repeating it over and over again.
Or to have that same student back in your class next year.
Yeah, Lord. Yeah, Thank
God for social promotion.
Yeah, I was going to say my district does social promotion. I don't ever have to deal with that. I'm torn about how I feel on that point.
Sure. So,
all right. So we've finished our first discussion. Mm-hmm. Damian, what do we got coming up next?
Ed, do you like Star Trek?
I am more a Star Wars guy than a Trek guy. I have a lot of friends who are really passionate Trekkers. I think that's the proper term nowadays, rather than Trekkies. Yeah, term. I have a number of friends who are very passionate, and I have always been kind of Trek adjacent.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're a geek, you kind of have to be.
Yeah. I've watched every Star Trek episode there is. I've watched, I think, every movie there is up until the last one or two. I'm also much more a Star Wars guy. To be fair, I'd rather live in a Star Trek universe than a Star Wars universe because they have things like healthcare. But I having watched all the Star Trek episodes that there are, there's one series that really stuck in my craw. And it was called Star Trek Enterprise. Actually, it wasn't even called Star Trek Enterprise. It was just called Enterprise. And it came about right on the heels of Voyager. Mm-hmm. And I want to take a look at where it fits into our cultural milieu, because it also came about 2 weeks after 9/11 happened.
Okay.
So we're going to take a look at how 9/11 didn't just ruin things for, what do we call those, civil liberties, but also for Star Trek. So next podcast will be an exploration of space and our inability to imagine things in a post-9/11 world.
All right.
Stay tuned, folks.
Sounds really bleak and depressing, so it'll fit right in.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. See you soon.